Okay, I think it's working this time. So, hello everybody. Welcome back, book lovers. And it's been a while since I made a video. So, actually, everybody here, or lots of people in Seoul just now, seem like they have the cold. And my wife and I have both had the cold for the past 2 weeks. So, haven't been making videos and haven't been very productive. But finally, seem to be getting over the cold. And so, I'm going to try and make a couple more videos, but I do have lots of videos planned, and so I'll try and get to work on them over the next few days. But anyway, today we're exploring an excellent short story collection that captures themes of war, love, and survival. Today we're talking about Hwang Sun-won's Lost Souls. The Korean title is 잃어버린 사람들, and translated by celebrated translators Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton, whose many excellent translations we have mentioned several times on the channel so far. And you can find those in the main book review playlist. And this collection is a compilation of 3 of Hwang's short story collections. So it compiles 3 collections together. There was one from the 1930s, and I've forgotten the name of. So the 1930s collection was called The Pond. There was a collection of stories from the 1940s called The Dog of Crossover Village. Fantastic title. And then the final collection was published in 1958, and it's called Lost Souls. And that's the title that's been given to this entire collection. And it's a beautiful book as well, and I love this photograph that's on the cover, but there's not that much information about this photograph in the book. But you can see these guys with their A-frames on their back. Great photograph. Anyway, so so Hwang is one of Korea's most celebrated writers. He's especially celebrated for his short stories. Lots of his short stories are considered classics. So perhaps the most famous story is Sonagi, translated here as Cloudburst. I think is one of his most famous stories. Maybe one of the most famous Korean short stories, perhaps. But he's also famous for short stories, Cranes and Stars, and many, many others. He wrote dozens of stories. He had a very long and fascinating life. He was born in 1915, so during the Japanese occupation of Korea in an area outside of Pyongyang, which is now obviously part of North Korea, the North Korean capital city. His family was displaced by the Korean War, and he ended up living in Seoul, where he worked as a teacher. And from here, he observed Korea's post-war years and subsequent rapid development and modernization. He was prolific and started his literary career as a poet when he published a trio of poems as a middle school student. So he started very young indeed. He then moved into short stories and novels. And like I said, I think he's most famous for some of the short stories he wrote, but he did also write some famous novels, such as Descendants of Cain and Trees on a Slope. In his later life, he returned to poetry, and he published his last collection at the age of 77 in 1992. But then sadly, he passed away in 2000. But he's celebrated for many things. The Fultons have written some excellent biographical and critical material about him, explaining his impact on Korean literature. But he's been called a humanist, a romanticist, a romantic, and a lyricist. And in an afterword to this Lost Souls collection, he's described as a gifted storyteller, but also strikingly contemporary in terms of his thematic concerns, sophisticated worldview, and multifaceted narrative style. And these are all things that we can identify in the stories that comprise Lost Souls. So, like I said, Lost Souls was a collection of 4 stories. These 4 stories were written and published during the 1950s, in the years following the Korean War. So, what type of stories is Hwang telling, and how do they reflect these momentous upheavals the country had just been through? So, 2 of the stories in the Lost Souls collection are directly connected to the events of the Korean War. In the collection's final and most disturbing story, Voices, the main character is Toku, and before the war, Toku was a struggling farmer, a kind of subsistence farmer in a small village in the countryside. He's poor, but he's diligent. He was poor, but he was very diligent. He cared for his wife and his land. He didn't have any vices. He wasn't a drinker or a gambler or anything like this. However, he's traumatized by his experiences in the war, and he loses his way in life. His behavior changes. In ways that are very destabilizing. And the story begins with Toku on the battlefield, and during a particularly violent battle, he's shot in the head. And as he lies there, he thinks he's dying, and then he thinks he's dead, and he imagines that his body is being dragged off with a rope around his neck. And he's seen this method of removing bodies many times after a battle, and he thinks this is what's happening to him. However, he isn't dead. He survives. The bullet entered through his eye and exited through his eye socket, through his orbital socket. So he's been shot through the head, essentially. But nevertheless, he's haunted by this image of the rope around his neck, and he has this recurring nightmare where he's been dragged along with this hangman's noose around his neck. And he tries to turn around to say, "I'm not dead, I'm alive." But he sees the person that's holding the rope is himself. It's a very striking and powerful image. It's disturbing and haunting, and conveys that some part of Toku has died. Some part of Toku was killed on the battlefield and will not return home. And after the war, he does return to his village, but like I said, his behavior is vastly different. He becomes a drunk. He spends all his time gambling. He abuses his wife. He neglects his responsibilities to the land that he manages. And the characterization of this process is heartbreaking. We see this conflicted person who, on some level, knows something is wrong, who desperately wants to get back on the path they know to be true and right, but they're so traumatized they just can't do it. They just struggle with this conflict. And whenever anyone challenges his behavior, he responds by saying, "Why shouldn't I act this way? I know the horrors that exist." But nevertheless, he can't escape these horrors that are haunting him. He can't escape this image of the rope around his neck dragging him, or dragging his corpse off the battlefield. It's a very inevitable and tragic story, but it's extremely compelling, and it highlights one of the collection's big themes. And that is of the outsider or the outcast. What does one do when the rest of society casts you out? So, what other outcasts do we meet in the collection, and how do their experiences contrast with Toku's post war experiences? So, the title story of the collection, Lost Souls, has an almost fable like quality to it. We're introduced to a young man from a small village called Sogi. So his name, the young man, is called Sogi, not his village. And his family is reasonably well off, and they have aspirations for him to be educated, and they make him study for the civil servant exam. Sogi, since childhood, has been infatuated with Suni, a girl from a much poorer family that his parents disapprove of. When they're young, when they're children, the Suni and Sogi, they sneak short, secret meetings together. But of course, they must hide their affection from their families. Then one day, Suni's family sells her to a wealthy older man to be his concubine. And several years pass before Suni can return to to her hometown and visit Sogi. And not knowing if or when they will ever meet again, Suni and Sogi take this opportunity to run away. And this sets in motion an unbearably sad and tragic tale, which again shows Hwang's gift for characterization and storytelling. This young couple love one another, but because of the expectations of their families, Sogi's family wants to climb the social ladder by having him become a civil servant and a respected member of the wider community, while Suni's family wants money and support from this rich old man that she's been given to. And because they wreck these aspirations, they become outcasts. And Hwang shows us the simple life that they lead, the happiness and warmth they find in one another, despite all the tragedies and misfortune that happened to them over the years. We know from the beginning that tragedy hangs over them. We know there won't be a happy ending for Suni and Sogi, and it's a beautiful and ultimately very moving tale. So I think I'm going to leave it there for the moment. I'll come back and I'll review some of the other stories in this collection again at some point in the future. But these stories, they show Hwang's gift for characterization. The characters just really pop. They're just they feel very real and living, breathing characters. And he also has a gift for storytelling. These are real and genuine and authentic stories, and at their best, they portray universal emotions and feelings. It's a very rich collection of very well crafted stories, full of great characters, compelling situations, and I'm sure many readers will find a lot to love in Hwang's work. And like I said, I will dip back into this collection again in the future. And I've got several other, there's quite a lot of Hwang books in translation. So, for instance, there's Sonagi, Cloudburst, and several other short stories and so on available in other collections. Anyway, thanks for watching. And again, I'm sorry that I haven't been making as many videos. And if you have the cold out there, I hope you get better soon. And thanks for watching. And I might try and make another couple of short videos later on today. So all the best. Bye for now.